It's electric. Boogie woogie woogie woo.
I'm aware of that, F2.0. Be sure you don't shock yourself. Oh, hey there. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you've never listened to the show before, welcome. In addition to providing entertaining and informative photography-related info, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. I like to call them the hashtag Nerdy Photo Crew. Right now, F2.0 and I are standing guard over a malfunctioning power supply while the rest of the crew helps to reroute converters to stabilize the energy output from this particular power station.
Some like it hot, some like when the heat is on.
Brilliant reference there, F2.0. Really appreciate it. We are definitely keeping the spark alive. And speaking of poorly connected segues, our guest for this episode is the legendary Scott Bourne. Scott joins us to talk about his 50-plus year photographic journey and keeping his passion for photography alive. We talk gear, we talk photo licensing. This talk is rich with advice for all the working photographers out there. All that after the break. Hey, F2.0, what exactly is generating all of this power again?
Turn me on tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. Radioactive.
I'm sorry, what? Hey there, photographers. Are you looking for a low-cost alternative to Photoshop and Lightroom? I would suggest you check out Skylum Software's Luminar. Luminar has a whole host of AI-powered editing tools that can help improve your photos. They also have a new offering coming out called Apperty, which is for portrait photographers, and they are currently running a special on lifetime subscriptions to Apperty. Go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Luminar, Luminar, or go to the links in the episode notes. There's more information in the episode notes, plus a special 10% discount code that you can add on top of the discounts that they are running right now. So go get that discount code and click those links and get yourself some Luminar. Are you ready to take your photography business to new heights? Look no further than PicTime, the ultimate solution for photographers who demand more. Wow your clients with stunning branded galleries that showcase your work like never before. Let your customers preview selected photos on an array of printed goods. PicTime's smart photo store ensures your art shines on everything from canvases to coffee mugs. And take the stress out of marketing with PicTime's automation tools that empower you to effortlessly connect with clients, leaving you more time to focus on your craft. And revolutionize your workflow with PicTime's cutting-edge AI tool that allows you to search and sort images effortlessly, saving you time and ensuring you find that perfect shot in seconds. And that helps you strengthen vendor relationships with precision, curate vendor galleries, sending them just the right images, and enhancing your professional connections. Worried about switching hosts? Fear not. The expert staff at PicTime can seamlessly migrate your photos, making the transition smooth and stress-free. So are you ready to transform your photography experience? Visit nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/PicTime today and discover a world where creativity meets efficiency. Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. I'm here today with Scott Bourne. Scott, welcome to the show. I'm very happy you could make it with here today.
Happy to be here. Happy to join you.
Before we get into things, we're going to start out with the dice breaker. It's a 5. What's the worst piece of either photography or business advice you've ever received?
Oh, I think the worst piece of photography advice I ever received was from a guy who said, only losers use tripods.
Oh, man.
And since I was frequently working with 800 millimeter lenses in my career, I got to tell you, unless you're Hercules, you ain't hand holding that puppy very long.
No.
So I decided to go ahead and be a loser and use a tripod.
That, you know, I find that anybody who speaks in those sort of like absolutes, like never use a tripod or always do this or never do that, like those are the people who tend to like maybe not give the best advice.
Well, yeah, maybe he was trying to be helpful. Maybe he really believed what he said. He probably read it in a camera form, or even more likely, he learned it on YouTube, since today photographers are trained on YouTube. In my day, we went to these things called photography school, but
Mm.
not nearly as apparently efficient as Pro Knows Photo.
Oh yes, and actually, you know what? That kind of leads me into like where I was going to go with this. I mean, you have an extensive career in photography. Um, you were kind of like helped found some of the the major photography blogs, first like real big photography podcast, and the sort of like where people learn now is far different than what, I mean, when I started out. I'm younger than you are. I've not been at it as long as you have, but I've been at it for quite a while. Like how we learned is vastly different than how people learn today.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you want to like, sure. How did you get started? How did you start learning about photography?
Well, I mean, my
Back in,
first foray into photography is simple. My girlfriend in high school had a father who was a photojournalist at the Indianapolis Star newspaper. And he had seen me muck around with my old Brownie camera and said, "Hey, you want a real camera?" And he gave me a Nikon FTN to play with.
hmm.
Little did he know I was going to use that to photograph his daughter nude, but that's okay. He never found out. And that was really my only interest in photography until I found out that you could photograph race cars. I grew up in Indianapolis around the 500. And long story short, my brother in law, uh, I had a half sister who was much older and married a guy. He was the sports editor at the Bloomington Herald Tribune in Bloomington, Indiana. He had a photo pass for the race, didn't have a budget to send a photographer, asked me if I wanted to go. I said, sure. I took the one roll of Tri-X I owned because I was so broke back then I couldn't afford to pay attention. And I took my 50 millimeter lens and my FTN and walked out to the track thinking, yeah, I'll get some good stuff. And through a series of crazy events where I just said yes to stuff I shouldn't have, I got sponsored by Nikon to shoot for the day with a brand new F1 with a motor drive, one of the first motor drives that ever came out. And I got lucky. Tom Sneva crashed in front of me. I got a picture in every newspaper in the country. I made $3,200, which is enough to buy a Camaro back then, a brand new Camaro. And I said, I'm going to be a professional photographer. And then that led to 6 years of working for Hemmings Motorsports News, traveling around racetracks all the way around the world. And I learned from just the old guys who were already on the circuit. And then after that, I went and did some photography school, but I always learned in the field myself. That was the way you did it back then. I wanted to learn portraiture, so I went and assisted a guy in Fort Smith, Arkansas for 6 months that had a big portrait studio, taught me how to use my first Hasselblad, taught me how to make portraits, how to do split lighting, broad lighting, short lighting, butterfly lighting, Rembrandt lighting, stuff that kids don't learn these days. They just learn how to do cool lighting on YouTube. But I learned all the basics. Now, people would argue that you don't need to learn those things these days. Maybe they're right. But I think it helps to know the rules before you break them. So my opinion is I learned the best way. I learned from actual teachers in the field, practitioners, people who are holding a camera. I will say there is a time for change always. And so I did have the idea well into my career to start the first photography blog, although it wasn't a blog technically because really simple syndication didn't even exist back then, RSS. It was called a photo magazine, photofocus.com. We started it November 2nd, 1998, and it still publishes today and has not missed a week since.
It's pretty amazing.
And then we started the TWIP podcast. A lot of people think Frederick Van Johnson started it or owns it. He just inherited it. It was me, Alex Lindsay, and a couple of other guys, Ron Brinkman. We really were the three founders of the show. Ron Brinkman was a technical guy at Apple. Alex is just, he's the professor on Gilligan's Island. He knows everything. He is a super video guy. And Alex and I later got involved with my friend Leo Laporte, and we did Mac Break Weekly for 3 years together on the TWIT network. TWIP was the photo podcast on the TWIT network. I did it for a year, and then I stepped away to build a podcast for Photo Focus gave it to Alex. Alex in turn gave it to Frederick. It's still in publication. Photo Focus podcast is still in publication. I've started several podcasts since, but the podcasting thing has gone the way of everything else. Now it's got to be on YouTube or nobody cares. And I got a face bill for radio. So that was when I decided it's time to let the youngins take over and step away. And I have no influence now. I'm a nobody, and it's kind of cool.
Enjoying semi-retirement.
Yeah, I'm anonymous now. Nobody cares what I think, and there's some freedom in that.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, for me, when I started out, my mother bought me, like, I had interesting in photography. My mom bought me a bunch of equipment at a estate sale. Actually, this is one of the cameras. This Minolta,
from the mind of Minolta.
Yeah. And I didn't know how good I had it. I had these like two cameras. I had a 50-1.7, 135 2.8, and a 28 2.8, and I was like, it's pretty good to start out with. And I was just out there, shooting, knowing nothing whatsoever. And then when I got into college, I took one class, which didn't really teach me much, but the same thing that you're talking about. When I moved to New York, I just started like going and hanging out with other photographers and learning from them and asking them questions. And I read a lot. I read a lot of books. Yeah. I read a lot of books, and to see how things have changed now, where there seems to be an emphasis on just like learning. Like, I just want to know how to copy your photo as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
As suppose you were saying, like learning the basics.
Yeah. Everyone goes on YouTube to learn how to do a certain thing they think they need to do. Unfortunately, they don't have the structure underneath that to understand why they need to do that. And this leads to, partial success sometimes. But in my opinion, and I've talked about this for years, I've made my living as a photographer, but that's not why I call myself a professional photographer. I call myself a professional photographer because I'm proficient. In other words, I can deliver the results that you see in my work time after time. I can replicate it absolutely guaranteed every time. I don't have to guess how the picture is going to come out. I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm proficient. And that's the missing link in the YouTube photographers. They're proficient at a thing. And most of the teachers are proficient at getting subscribers, not necessarily at photography. Now, I'm not picking on any one guy. I'm not going to. There are a couple of them that are actually quite talented as photographers, but they're better at getting YouTube clicks. And unfortunately, the camera manufacturers have fallen into the trap of thinking, well, those guys have the big audiences, so they're the influencers. And now they're relying on those guys and gals exclusively. And I think it's hurt them. I think that there's a whole lot of disconnect between what needs to happen and what is happening. And I don't know if it will change for the better or the worse. If people find it helpful, I'm glad for them. But I would prefer to see people do the old-fashioned thing, like read a book, take a class, go out with a pro, an actual practitioner, see what they do, figure out what's working for them. And then a couple of other steps, look at lots of pictures, read your dang manual and learn how to use your camera. Don't worry about anybody else's. And take lots of pictures every day. Yeah. That's the recipe for success. And I'm a nobody. I'm not talented. I have no visual gifts. I'm not an artist. I suck at all that stuff. I had to just work 52 times harder than everybody else to get my stuff out there. And by working hard, I was able to overcome my lack of artistic vision. There are some people with great vision that don't know any of the technical stuff, and they make good money and they have good success. So everybody can come at it from different ways. But I do think, I watch some of these YouTube videos and I just shake my head. I'm like, I don't understand. I just don't understand how these things are popular, because the information they're giving is at best often incomplete.
It's nebulous at times. Like and I feel like it's designed in, I understand what you're saying. There's some people out there who are very good. I try to be someone who like teaches people things that are, helpful, that are actually going to, and I don't let people fall for the trick of just saying like, what were your camera settings? I'm like, because that's not going to teach you anything.
Yeah, that's the number one question I get.
And I think that part of it is to keep people coming back to them, because they're still going to have questions. They're not actually like solving the problem that you had originally. I think that for those people who are very like successful in getting people to be their YouTube subscriber or whatever and stick around just for the fact of like, oh, I didn't quite get what what I was hoping for. Maybe I'll go back for another video, and just keeping them watching for longer, because that means, more minutes racked up on YouTube, which increases their, viability for advertising.
Well,
dollars.
I just like to put it like this. Could you learn how to drive a big rig on YouTube?
Funny story. I actually used to test video games, and one of them was a big rig simulator. It was the most boring thing in the world. And it was just
the thing is, you can get the concepts. You can learn a few things about what needs to happen, but you can't learn to fly an airplane or drive a big rig on YouTube. You have to actually spend time in the seat. And I'll put it like this. If I'm going to let you on my road, you're going to have to spend actual time in the seat before I'm going to give you a license.
Exactly.
And I'm going to fly in your plane. I want to make sure you've actually got some training and done this. And YouTube for photography, to me, it's just the same. I mean, there are people who argue with me about going to Bosque del Apache, for instance, which I've gone to now 38 years. I've been going to Bosque del Apache to photograph birds. 38 years, and I've led, sometimes 3 or 4 workshops a year. I've led more than 50 workshops there. I've spoken at the Cranes Festival multiple times, and there are people that will say, I saw this YouTube video and they said to do it like this. And like, have you ever been to Bosque del Apache? Well, no. Have you ever photographed sandhill cranes? Well, no. But so-and-so said, and I'm like, okay, I just give up. I just completely give up because, I'm doing pretty well financially based on what I've shot there. And I licensed that stuff. I have 4,444 images under license as we speak. And I'm arguing with a guy who's an expert because he watched a YouTube video. And this is the point at which the movie Idiocracy seems to have been misdirected as a comedy. It should have been a documentary. I
feel like, there's I don't know. There's definitely a disconnect, because in the same way I get lots of questions from people like, oh, how do I, do this? And I'm like, okay, well, do we get into the concept of like, the lighting, or, choosing to decide whether it's, your shutter speed or your aperture or whatever, and they're like, no, just tell me like how to set up the lights, whatever. And I'm like, that is doing you a disservice. And then I usually get called a gatekeeper at that point, because I'm withholding knowledge by not just giving you the settings.
You can't win. You can't win. Give me your sharpening recipe.
Just give me your presets and tell me exactly how you do it.
Oh my God, that is the worst thing in the world. I mean, but people say, well, what were your settings for that picture? And I'm like, unless you're going to be there on the same exact day, in the same exact wind, in the same exact weather, in the same exact sunrise, in the same exact clouds, and the same exact everything, my settings are utterly irrelevant to you.
Right. Yeah.
I can tell you the concept of maybe I want to shoot wide open and use a high shutter speed if I want to freeze the wings on a bird, or maybe not too high if I want a little movement. That's all you need to know about my settings. My exact settings are utterly worthless to you because you will never be there at the same exact time and moment and day and circumstances as I was, because that day's past.
Right.
And the next day and moment and circumstance will be different. And this notion that it all goes to, I want to play golf. I'm going to buy the same golf clubs Tiger Woods uses. And by golly, by next Wednesday, I'm hitting 300-yard drives, baby. Makes no sense at all. But it's how this entire industry now works. It's like such and such a camera influencer has convinced you need this camera. 6 months from now, he gets a different sponsor and he's going to tell you need this camera instead. So you go tell your wife you need that. And pretty soon you've got a bunch of people with a bunch of cool equipment in their cases in their house who never go take pictures.
Right.
And I just find it very frustrating. And I apologize for being so blunt and direct if I'm offending anybody. I certainly don't mean to, but I'm an old guy. I'm allowed to rant, get off my lawn. It's I'm 70 years old. I've been at this since I say I've done it for 50 years. I actually started when I was 16. So 54 years I've been doing this. And I think I got some idea how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, I think that, and there's if people really truly want to learn, and I think that this is where there's sort of a tipping point here. Is it somebody who's willing to put in the work? And it's like something that I talk about a lot. Do you want to have staying power in this? Do you want to continue doing this for a long time? Or are you just looking to like short term and you're just like, I want to, start making money as soon as possible? Because I see it a lot in my area of the industry, like weddings. I see a lot of people who do this for 5 years and then all of a sudden they're a marketing expert. And they're going to teach all these marketing courses on how to how you can be completely booked every year and, make 6 figures every year or whatever. And I'm like, well, why are you teaching so many courses if you're so busy as, shooting?
I did weddings for 5 years. I think that's about the average everyone's knees last. But I will tell people, if you want to make a lot of money, that's where you make it, because people aren't going to stop getting married and they want wedding pictures and the bride's always going to show up. It's a lot easier than wildlife photography because I can't email a bird and say, would you please stand on this post while I make your picture? But you can tell the bride to be there and she'll show up. Now, the groom may not show up, but the bride will absolutely show up. I think I actually love shooting weddings when everything goes well and everyone's in a good mood and you don't have 3 wives as the mother and you don't have 15 cousins who are not allowed to be anywhere near the bride because they're all iffy. I mean, the stuff that I had to deal with, man, it just made the money not worth it. Yeah. And you're kind of describing the next thing that bugs me in the industry. It's like all these people that say how to get rich on YouTube, and how to get rich on YouTube is to create videos about how to get rich on YouTube.
Exactly.
That old Ponzi scheme is we're seeing a lot of that in the industry. I'll teach you how to be a wedding photographer.
I'll teach you how to do this. Why aren't you doing it?
Exactly.
So
this
easy.
is a very interesting point. The guys in the wedding industry that are really successful, I know most of them, for the bulk of their career, they did not teach because they were often simply too booked. And then as they get to the edge of their career, they do start to teach because they actually have a legitimate desire to help and give back, and they've made their money and they don't want to do 50 weddings anymore.
Right.
They'd rather do 10 or 20, and they don't mind going out on the circuit. And if you do want to learn weddings, learn from Jerry Guionis, learn from Roberto Valenzuela, learn from these guys who have done it. I've been to Jerry's house. He's got a room full of WPPI awards, and it looks like the Golden Globes office. There are literally there's walls of them, and they're there for a reason. The guy's a genius. So learn from, but you know what? You can take a video class from Jerry, but my strongest recommendation is he offers these 1-week boot camps. If you go take that class in 1 week, you will learn enough to do a passable job at a wedding, and you will start yourself on a career that works. I do not believe you can learn how to be a wedding photographer on YouTube. Yeah. I do believe you can get some tips, but you've got to go study with one of these people that does this every week and has for a long time, and who's been lauded as one of the greats, and who charges 25 grand for a wedding and gets it because that's where you'll learn.
Yeah, because they know what they're doing, and I think that's the. It reminds me of I have a friend who I've known for like 15 years now, maybe longer, who used to be a second shooter for me. Whenever was trying to break into the New York wedding market on their own, and he said to me, he's like, I don't understand what's going on, like why I'm not getting any gigs. And I was like, well, how many weddings have you actually shot? And he was like, well, I've done about 5 or 10, like on my own. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's not bad. And I'm like, let me take a look at your website. And then immediately I went to his website, and he was already at that point charging like what I would consider high end money in New York. And I said, why did you choose this price point? I'm like, is that what you need to, make ends meet? Is this like cost of doing business? And he's like, no, I just saw that like a bunch of the people that I saw in New York. And I was like, well, you're not there yet. Like you haven't reached that level where you can, all the people that you were looking at are like very high end, good people to like take a look at what their market is and like what they're putting out there for that. But like also you have not reached that, people who've been here for, 15, 20 years and have been at the top of the game for a very long time. What they're charging is not what you should be charging after having done 5 weddings. It's a sort of like people who want to jump in and be at the top.
Well, listen, my dad had his saying, everybody wants to be a rock star. Nobody wants to take music lessons.
Yeah. Nobody wants to practice.
That's where we're at in the whole world right now.
Yeah.
YouTube makes people stars. Instagram makes people stars. They're 20 years old, have no real experience in anything, but they're pretty or they're smart or they have a great man bun and away they go.
I mean, what advice do you have for photographers who let's say, even for me, I'm out here, I'm trying to, I've been doing this podcast for a little over like almost 5 years now. I've got a good following of people, creating things for people that are genuinely helpful, or like for people who are out there looking for someone. I mean, I noticed you mentioned Jerry, and like going to someone who's at the top of their game to learn from there. But what's your advice for our listeners? They might not be looking to get into wedding photography. What should they be looking for in the people that they are paying attention to, either on YouTube, on podcasts, somebody who's teaching a workshop?
Well, my first advice is to look for people whose work you truly admire. If somebody takes pictures, like I'm a bird photographer, if you like my bald eagle photos and you think that's the bomb, then I'm probably the guy to teach you how to do that. But if you think my bald eagle photos suck, don't listen to me, no matter how successful I am. Pick the kind of photographer that you want to be, look at the work that you see that you want to do, and then, investigate the opportunities to work with them and have them mentor you. Many people will mentor you if you ask. I mentor people all the time. You have to pay a little bit, but there are people I've mentored for many years, and some of them have gone on to do great things because they listen to me. And, that's the other thing. If you ask for advice, be willing to accept it. But really, man, the biggest thing you can do, I'll tell you the secret to becoming great at photography in 1 year. Nobody wants to do this, but I've taught this for 30 years, and the people who do it all come to me and say, oh my God, I 10x'd my game in 12 months. I can't believe it. And it doesn't involve spending a dime, not one 10-cent piece. Look at lots of published pictures every day. The kind of pictures you want to take. If you're a wedding photographer, look at Bride Magazine. Look at those kinds of things. If you're a pet photographer, look at Pet Fancy. Look at Cat and Dog magazines. Look at books of that. Look at the pictures that are published in the ads for dog food of dogs, because those were sold by a commercial photographer. They were licensed, and they might have made a lot more money off that one image than you will selling 100 prints. The money in this business is in licensing, by the way. Yeah. It's not making prints. Just look at lots of published pictures, because Stephen King, the great author, has a phrase. He said, if you want to become a better writer, read. That same thing applies in photography. If you want to become a better photographer, look at lots of published pictures. Now, when I say published, I don't mean on YouTube. I mean, walk around downtown in any big city, get a notepad out and walk a 4-block area and count how many pictures you see on bus stops, signs, in windows at stores for displays, on billboards, on flatboard signs. every one of those pictures was sold by somebody.
Yeah.
And I started doing this when I was young, and I'd walk around and go, somebody sold that. Why wasn't it me? And I used that to fuel my thing, and also to get a sense of this is the standard. Doesn't matter what your opinion of the standard is. It matters what the buyer's opinion of the standard is. There's an old saying in this business: "Beauty's in the eye of the checkbook holder."
That's
So I don't really care what your buddies on YouTube or Twitter think of your photos. I care what the editor of the magazines you're trying to get into thinks.
Yeah.
And that's all you should care about. And how can you know what they're looking for unless you're looking at the pictures they've published? So that's number one.
Yeah.
I think comment on that.
I think that's it's something I try to tell people all the time. And there's a reason I separate the nerdy photographer stuff completely from my photography work. I don't, because they're two different audiences. Like I'm, you're not, there are too many people out there who are posting work or trying to impress other photographers instead of,
they're never going to buy your pictures.
Right. The people who are going to pay you money, like your potential clients, people who are going to license your images. Any of that. Those are not the people. Like, other photographers are not the ones who are going to give you a career.
Yeah, I took this step further. I actually went to many different industry events to talk with photo editors, to sit down with them and say, how many submissions do you get a week? 50,000. Okay. What helps images rise to the top? How many do you publish? 20. Okay. Now we start to see what we're up against. How can I get my images? No, I just asked these questions. Okay. But it all starts with, you've got to look at and identify what's success. The second thing I tell people to do is, I know it sounds boring, crazy, and lame, but it absolutely works. Read your camera manual every day, without exception. I don't care if you're in the hospital. If you can read a page in your camera manual every day and handle your camera every day, pick it up, and whatever the page you're on, if it says, here's how to use rear sync, rear curtain flash, and you say, I'll never need that. BS. You may need it. Do what it says. Go through the motions and do this every day. I recommend people change lenses often, not camera bodies. Keep the camera body for 3 or 4 or 5 years. Anything made after 2016 is good enough to work commercially. I actually just picked up this little gem. This is a 5 or something year old Lumix GX9. It's a spectacular camera. It was state of the art when it came out. It was flagship. This camera is good enough to produce commercial work, and it cost me $700.
Yeah, there's a lot amazing. Of that. There's a lot of great cameras.
So pick a camera you like. Read the manual every single day. Once you get through it, go back and start. And you don't even have to start on page 1. Pick a random page to start on. Read from there, catch up, and then do it again. If you do that every day, what will happen is, your camera will become an extension of your fingertips, and you will no longer think about it at all. And that's what we want.
Right.
Because the real business is all up here, not down here. So you got to get your eyes working, and you don't have time to get your eyes working if you're worrying about how to set the aperture. So get that to where it's just second hand. And by the way, this makes people mad when I say this, but have all your backup bodies be the same as your main body.
Yeah.
Because your muscle memory is going to have to be the same if you have to pick one up, and you're going to be totally screwed if you've never used that camera. So you need 2 of whatever you're using minimum.
I recently, over a year, switched to mirrorless. First of all, there's so many people who will like, oh, you're a dinosaur if you're still using a DSLR. And I'm like, I have film cameras that produce amazing images. Like, DSLRs can, still produce great photos. But I bought my first mirrorless camera at a time when I knew that I wasn't going to be working as much, because I was like, I really want to take the time to familiarize myself with all of this is a new layout, of buttons and everything. And I want to take the time to be able to so that when I do go to a wedding, I'm going to pick that thing up and I'm going to be able to it's going to be second nature again, because the button layout was completely different. Even though it's the same manufacturer, Canon. I was just like, wow, you moved the things around enough that it my fingers were not in the same places. So I had to, it took me about a month to get back up to speed.
Unless you're photographing mountains that don't ever move, muscle memory is a big deal in photography. And if you're a wedding photographer and you tell the bride and the groom to walk out on this grassy knoll by a pond so you can get a nice moment with them, and then you're taking shots, and then you can't remember, you decide you want more depth of field, you look down, you do this, and that's the precise moment at which he bends over and straightens her garter for her, and then he stands up and you look up and you missed it because you were messing with your aperture.
Right.
This kind of thing drives me nuts. If you just know the camera, you should be able. When I was in the Army, they taught us how to field strip our weapons in the dark. And at the moment, I thought it was stupid until I got into a situation when I needed to know how to field strip my weapon in the dark. So I like to treat my cameras like they're an M16, and I want to make sure that I can operate that puppy in the dark. I know where everything is, so I practice with it. And that gets me to my third and final thing. Remember, none of these things has cost you any money so far. You can look at images for free. You can look at your camera manual. On the camera that you own today is just fine for free. The last thing is take at least one photograph every day without exception. Take that camera out of the bag. Take the lens cap off. Turn it on. Make sure the memory card, the battery in there, and make a photograph. I don't care if it's of a beer can on the back porch. Make a photograph, at least one, every day. I don't care if it's raining. I don't care if you're in a hurricane. I don't care if you're sick. I don't care if you're busy. I don't care if your kids got to play. You got time to make one photograph. Now, if you do this every day, that means you'll have made at least 365 photographs in the year. You don't want to be what I call a workshop photographer. I meet these people all the time. They come on my workshops. They got a brand new camera. They haven't used it in 3 months. And they're asking me questions. Now, how do I put the battery in again? These issues should be solved long ago. And so they only handle their camera when they're out on a workshop or on vacation, and they're never good with it because of that. If you handle it every day, if you're using that, read a page in the manual every day, and if you're looking at published pictures every day, wherever you are today when you start this process, 1 year from now, you will be a monster. You will be 10x the photographer you are today, and you can easily go up what I call the 10 ring ladder. There's 10 rungs to the ladder ring to be a master photographer. The first 9 are attainable in 1 to 3 years. To get from 9 to 10 takes 50 years. But the first 9 can be learned very quickly. And if you do the things I just told you to do religiously, without exception, without excuse, and you really apply yourself and you say, I'm going to allow myself 15 stinking minutes a day, no matter what, to look at pictures, read a page of my manual, do the thing it talks about, and take a photo, I swear I will on my mother's grave, you will be 10x the photographer you are today in just 1 year. And a very small percentage of my students actually take me up on this, but the ones who have all universally told me, and I mean, I've probably taught 30,000 people how to make pictures. So, probably 3%, 4%, 5% that have actually done this have all told me, oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever learned. And it doesn't cost any money. And you don't have to subscribe to my YouTube channel to learn it. And you don't have to click on any advertiser sponsored links or click the bell to make me happy. All you have to do is just take my advice.
Yeah, I think that looking at pictures, understanding the market that you're in, what the people who are buying photos and licensing photos, understanding that that's like when you're talking about making money in this industry, you need to know what people are interested in. You figuring out your market is one of the most important things to do. Second, like you're talking about, like understanding your equipment. I think, I always joke, my grandfather used to say, instruction manuals are for people who don't know what they're doing. And he'd just toss them wherever. Like, as soon as he got one, he'd just like throw it away and be like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. But you, like you said, you learn things, you understand your camera better to like what it's capable of, because there was a while like I was afraid of flash when I was starting out and just didn't quite get how to use a flash and what I was doing. But then I sat down and I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And I did that exact thing every day. I was learning something new about my flash, and I learned like stroboscopic flash, which is kind of difficult. I was taking fencing classes at the time, and I was just like, I had my friends in fencing class. I'm like, I'm just going to test this out and try it to see if I can like make this work. So, but like, I have never used it since, but I know how to do it. I figured out how to do it, and just like and taking pictures is just, it's, especially with digital, it doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to do anything. You just like take pictures. Like that's it's so simple, and you become you just like you look at your stuff. I look back at like I went to a Vivian Mayer exhibition earlier in the year, and thinking of the fact that she never really looked at a lot of those photos that she took blows my mind, because I learned so much from seeing, my images and going like, oh, okay, I remember what I did there and what I don't want to do next time. Going out and taking pictures, like you said, it's so simple and helps you like volumes, like just the amount of knowledge that you get just from going out and taking a picture a day and being intentional about it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like, I hear a lot of people say, "Well, I'm a natural light photographer." Well, what I hear back is, "I'm afraid to learn Flash." And there, that now Flash is something, frankly, that you probably can learn a lot about on YouTube, because if you've got all this other stuff as your core knowledge, you're just learning some techniques. But there's some, David Hobby, Joe McNally, Bobby Lane, the Mistress of Light, Tony Corbell, Clay Blackmore. Go find any of these 5 people's things on YouTube. They all know more about light than you know about anything in your life. These people have mastered light. Tony Corbell can show you how to make 24 different portraits with one light. And, he's a master. He's photographed every head of state in the world. Clay Blackmore worked with the great Monty Zucker when he was young, and has got a wedding and portrait business that makes him big dinero. He's a Canon Explorer of light. He knows everything. Bobby Lane, she's the mistress of light. She works with Fuji. She's done it. She's done it all. All of these people can teach you like crazy stuff about light that can give you some ideas that you can then, in your one photo a day, practice. If you master light, if you do understand the difference between broad lighting, short lighting, butterfly lighting, Rembrandt lighting, split lighting, etc., you know more about that than probably 95% of the photographers in your market, and you'll be able to smoke them when it comes to results, because they at best are pretending, and you know what you're doing if you follow my advice. This game is simple. It involves putting a camera in your hand, taking pictures, not talking about it, dreaming about it, thinking about it, wishing about it, just doing it. That'll make you the best photographer you can be. And every day that you sit on your couch and say, but what about? But what about this? But, well, I don't have the right lens, or but I don't have the right market. That's all just a crutch you've created for yourself to give you an excuse to sit on the couch, which is much easier than getting up and trying something. But the problem for everybody who's listening today is that, I'm 70 years old. I swear to God, I was 25 years old 15 minutes ago. The time flies, dude. It flies fast. You're going to turn around in 15 minutes and be an old man like me and go, where did all that time go? And then you're going to be out of time. So do it now while you have the chance. If you're passionate enough about photography to listen to this show, well, get off the couch. Just get off the couch. I'll help you any way I can. And I'm sure that everyone that's listening needs help. We'll help you, but it involves you doing something.
Right.
And not staring at YouTube.
It involves like putting in the effort. I think that's like,
you said that early on in the show.
Yeah.
Effort is a big deal.
Yeah. You don't just get to like you had mentioned, like, oh, I've got the latest and greatest camera, and now that's going to do everything. That's going to be the magic bullet that makes my photography. Well, not if you don't know how to use it. And if you don't know how to understand it and create your vision for things. And I think that's one of the things that I find a lot of people recently, last 10 years, whatever, there's been more and more people who are just like, I just want to create a photo that looks like that. Like, well, find your voice. It might be similar. It might be an echo of something you saw somewhere else, or, but like finding your own thing and like deciding yourself instead of like going out, like, I'm just going to recreate these images that I saw somebody else do. And that involves getting out there and being like, okay with like the pictures that you take. And, it's like, this is my vision of this. You brought up something that in mentioning all of those people, they're ambassadors for various camera companies or lighting companies. You've been an ambassador. And
I was an ambassador for Olympus for nearly 5 years until JIP bought the company and Olympus sold out. Then at that point in time, I resigned.
What is that experience like? I'm curious. I've never been an ambassador.
First of all, it's the greatest honor in the world. I mean, there's a handful of photographers who are asked to be mainline spokespeople for a camera brand. So, when that happened to me, I thought, wow, this is, I've made a lot of money in this business, but this might be bigger because it's important recognition. So I was grateful, and it was really fantastic, until it wasn't. It was great until Olympus decided to sell the company, and had they not sold it, I'd probably still be there. But I got to hang out. I figured I was always the least talented of the ambassadors. I got to hang out with 2 Pulitzer Prize winners on that team. I got to travel the world on Olympus's dime. So that wasn't bad. I was shooting Canon before I switched. I had 5 Canon 1DX Mark IIs, in fact. I had an 800, 600, 500, 400, 300 millimeter lens paired to each of those. And problem was, I've had a bunch of shoulder surgeries because I've spent my career trekking around with these big
giant lenses
long before they were carbon fiber tripods, carrying 30, 40, 50 pounds on my shoulder up and down mountains looking for birds. And I've had 11 shoulder surgeries. And the 11th one, my doc said, I can't fix this anymore. He said, you may go paralyzed on your entire right side of your body if it breaks again. So try to keep what you lift to 10 pounds. I was like, oh man, I'm done. And then I found Olympus, and I bought with my own money a full Olympus kit, took it to Alaska, photographed bald eagles. I was able to get great stuff. I said, boom, this is it. Sold all the Canon gear. Luckily, 2 of my lenses bought me everything Olympus made because it's so much more expensive. And then Olympus called me and made me ambassador. And all these people were saying, oh, you just switched because they paid you. I'm like, I wish that were true. I spent $25,000 of my own money to get this gear, and then they hired me. But it pays pretty well if you do. I mean, the way each camera company does it differently, but people get compensated for a variety of things, how many speeches they give. And most importantly, Olympus paid me to license my images. So they don't get them for free just because I'm a visionary.
Right.
They give you a stipend every year, which is, some little money. And then if the additional money comes if they use your images. So they will say, hey, we want to use your image in an ad we're going to run in this magazine. You got paid.
Right.
And the best thing they did was they asked me to write a book on bird photography tips. And they gave a copy of that book. They gave copies of that book away in every camera store in North America and eventually the world. And I got paid pretty good on that one. But more importantly, I got to hang out with the engineers at Olympus, give them advice. I got to have a lot of input into the development of the 150 to 400 lens, which I'm pretty proud of because it's the most expensive micro four third lens ever built. And it was 3 years back ordered. It's so popular. I got to go places, see people, meet people. I got to go to, Hong Kong, all kinds of cool places. So yeah, it's a pretty sweet gig. And everybody asks me, well, how do you get to become an ambassador? And it's bad news is, well, there's nothing you can do. They'll call you if they're interested.
Right. If their people will contact you if they want to.
There's nothing you can do to make yourself an ambassador. They'll find you and say, hey, you. But the sad truth of that is, I'd say if you have 1 million YouTube followers, it's likely you'll get that call. It doesn't matter if you're any good at photography at all. It matters if you have 1 million YouTube followers. And if you're young, because frankly, and I'm not saying this about Olympus, I'm not going to say anything about any specific company, but a lot of the camera companies are firing their older ambassadors because they figure, well, they're not as relevant as they used to be, and we want young people. And I'm thinking, well, it's old guys that got the money to buy 800 millimeter lenses, not
Right.
20-year-olds. But okay, it's it's changing, but you actually we're starting to see a couple of the companies have done away with official ambassadors. I believe Fuji and Sony both, or at least modified. They have some that are still on the list, but they aren't really. They're changing how those programs work. It's not the way it used to be. Nikon and Canon still have basically the same programs that they've always had, but they're thinning them down a little bit. OM Systems, the new Olympus, has a few young ambassadors. I don't think they have anybody older than 25. It's a great gig if you can get it. I'll put it like this, but it's like being an NFL quarterback. There's very few of them in the world.
Right. There's a very few people who compete at that level, shall we say.
Yeah. My advice is don't aspire to be one of those. Just aspire to be a working professional that you can support your family with the money you make.
Yeah.
That right there is a big win because it means you get to do a job that you're fulfilled and happy in.
Yeah. I always laugh because I'll have people who, like I said, I don't, this whole channel of things from the Nerdy Photographer is more designed to help other people out and like laugh at, silly stuff in our industry. And I'll have people like going, "Oh, you're not a real photographer." And I'm like, well, I've been doing this for 25 years and I've supported myself and my family through it. I'd consider that real.
Yeah,
that's a real thing.
The first rule of this is now everybody's a troll, so I just block them.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because I was fairly self-conscious about myself, and like you said before, I have a face for radio. I don't like being in front of the camera that much, but it actually made me more interested in, like, I'm going to be in front of the camera more because it pushed me in that sense of like, to hell with those guys. It's the people who are just out there to speak negatively and whatever, get mad at somebody else who's trying to help people.
Trust me, I before Twitter got sold to Elon Musk and became a haven for Nazis, I had 250,000 Twitter followers, which ain't bad if you're a fat, ugly old man. I mean, if you're a pretty young woman, that's easier to attain. But if you're me, it was tough. But I walked away from it. But during that time, probably 2,000 of those people were full-time trolls, and I mean, they spent all day attacking me, making up stories about me, spreading lies about me. And I learned I just blocked them and ignored it. And you can't control anything outside your own sphere of what you do. And those people are unhappy and I feel sad for them, but it doesn't change the fact that every night when I'm done, I feel good about what I've accomplished. And I've been able to amass fair amount of money and travel the world and meet princes and kings and rock stars and race car drivers and movie stars and do anything I want with this job. And I've been able to impact people and people have told me how my images have impacted them. And I hear stories about them. My most famous picture, Cranes in the Fire Mist, I still get email about that every day. And I made that picture many years ago.
Hey, you made me think about something that you've had a very extensive career. What motivates you to continue pursuing new projects at this point?
Well, I'm not pursuing much in the way of new projects. I'm
just sharing
retired.
knowledge.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing knowledge because I sort of feel like this, Steve Jobs gave a speech towards the end of his life where he talked about the gift of mortality. And it was very poignant because he knew he was dying. And he said, being mortal was a real gift. And I'll tell you why. If we were immortal, we would never have any incentive to do anything right now. We'd say, oh, I'll learn to play guitar in 50,000 years because, I've got all the time in the world. I don't need to learn that now. And we'd put everything off. There'd be no urgency. The fact that we have a finite period here for men in the United States, it's around 73 years. I don't have long to go. So I'm the tall tree in the forest. The way it works, the tall trees in the forest need to fall so the shorter trees in the forest can get some sunlight. So I sort of see my role now as trying to empower others so that they can grow up and get their sunlight, and then try to keep my name alive after I'm dead. There's a Mexican saying is you don't really die until nobody says your name. So I'm trying to keep myself alive that way. I don't have any kids, so I spent my whole career on the road, 300 days a year shooting, no time for children in that situation. So my progeny is my work and my teaching, the 14 books I've done, uh, the 1,200 workshops I've led, the 4,000 podcasts I've been on, the 5,000 how-to articles I've written. That's my progeny, and I do that once in a while if I feel like I can help someone. But to be honest, I don't do a lot of it because I just don't. I don't think I have the influence or the audience that I used to, and people would rather hear something from someone young, and I understand that. So I help when I'm asked, and I'm writing a couple of books for fun and not because I want to make any money. And I'm just trying to, my whole life has been working. I've been working since I was 14 years old. So it's actually being retired is very tough because I don't quite know what to do with myself. I have this great TV room I built in my house with like state-of-the-art sound systems. I mean, it cost me six figures. It's a bunch of money. And I turned it on maybe couple times a month to watch Seahawks football. And now that I'm retired, I'm like, oh, I get to watch Game of Thrones. And I start to like be able to participate in normal conversations with people because I know what their life is, what they're talking about. Before this, I had no idea. I was just working. So it's kind of fun.
So I think this is like a good question to sort of like start wrapping things up. You've seen a lot of trends come and go. Yep. Over your time as a photographer. What is your advice? And I also want to say, like, listen, I'm getting up and be the old man as well, and there's still lots to learn from you, from people out there who have a lot of experience. Hopefully, I can help people along the way. What is your advice to people who want to try to stay true to themselves in an industry that's constantly changing and you got to do video now. You got to be a content creator as well as a photographer, all these other things going on. What is your advice?
It depends a lot on a couple of things. It depends on your goals. It depends on your audience. In the business side of this, the number one success point starts with knowing who your audience is. If you're selling dog pictures, you're not going to get any of them published in Cat Fancy magazine. That's the wrong audience. So you got to know your audience and you got to know your goals. Not everybody wants to make a living at photography. They just want to be good at it. Or maybe their goal is to win a single contest or be published just once. And, I'd say if those are your goals, then do whatever you have to achieve them. If you have long-term goals about, I think the reason I'm in photography is I want to speak for my subjects because they usually can't speak for themselves. They're wildlife. And I want to protect them and do things to help people conserve them. So I have that is my ultimate goal. I don't care what trends are at all because they don't impact my goal. And I think people that follow trends get sucked into something that eats them up because as soon as that trend goes away, and believe me, it will, now that's what you're known for. And there's a new trend and you're not going to get known for that. No one's going to believe you because they're going to see what you've done and that's your trend. If you, conversely, if you just go with your heart, this is all very ethereal and difficult for newbies, especially to get. But if you can feel your way to a photograph, as opposed to trying to copy, duplicate, replicate, but actually just what is it that you feel standing at that spot with that subject? Share that with us. Right. If you can do that, then you can have a long career at whatever your goal is. I think trends will mess you up most of the time, unless your goal is strictly, I want to make as much money in a short period of time as I can. So the current trend might be lots of lens flare or lots of bokeh, or then go with that because that'll get you paid. But, it doesn't really mean anything. Today, everybody's big thing is, I want a 1.0 lens because I want that beautiful bokeh. And I looked at Life and Look magazines. These are two magazines that no longer exist. Most of your audience had never heard of, but they were the pinnacle of photo publication for a couple of decades. And the photographs that were published in them were all shot at f8.
Right.
And there was
higher.
no bokeh.
Yeah.
And the whole background was in focus, and these are the best. These are the pictures hanging in museums right now, not the beautiful bouquet, and not how round are the bouquet balls and that kind of crap. It was all in focus.
Yeah.
So Vivian Maier wasn't shooting for bouquet; she was shooting to tell stories. So I think trends can blow you up, and they're fun and cool if you feel like you need a project, but I think you're much better off. This is the greatest thing about photography is it's a single pursuit. I used to do some work with Leonard Nimoy, the guy that played Spock in Star Trek. I helped him build his first ever website. Turns out he was a spectacular photographer. He did fine art nudes, and he was Jewish, so he used this. He did this with this stuff called Jewish mysticism. And the pictures were all of beautiful women, but their faces were always covered. It's very elaborate, very detailed work. And I asked him what it was that drew him to photography versus his work on like motion pictures. And he said, when I'm on a motion picture, there may be 300 people involved in making that final product. I'm but a tiny cog in that big wheel. But when I'm behind a camera, it's just me. And this is, I own all that real estate.
Right.
And I tell people this all the time, whatever format you're shooting, if it's 24 by 36 millimeters, every one of those belongs to you. Nobody can tell you what to put there. Nobody can tell you what not to put there. It's all you, baby. So show us something. This is your chance to show us who you are. Speak to us. It's the difference between a musician who simply plays all the notes in a composition with no kind of inflection point. They just play them all the same length, the same volume, the same tonality. There's da 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 versus da da. Music is the space between the notes, and real photography is the space where you tell us how you feel, not duplicating some trend. I know that's a very heady answer, but I can't help it. It's the only one I got.
I am 100% there with you. Hey, photographers, are you tired of using the same stale poses with your clients, resulting in stiff and unnatural photos? Consider using Let's Be Real prompts instead. Prompts are not just a list of poses. They're designed to help you create a more engaging, fun environment for your photo subjects, resulting in more natural and authentic images. With Nerdy Photographer's Let's Be Real prompts, you'll have a unique set of prompts for couples, weddings, families, and individuals, ensuring that you never run out of ideas. Prompts are particularly helpful for clients who are nervous or self-conscious about having their picture taken. By giving them something else to focus on, they can become more relaxed and their reactions will be more authentic and less guarded. Using Let's Be Real prompts will not only help you create more fresh and dynamic images, but it will also increase your confidence and your client's confidence in you. You'll be able to handle difficult situations and subjects with ease, resulting in more satisfied clients and a stronger photography business. So start using Let's Be Real prompts from the Nerdy Photographer today and elevate your photography to the next level. Go to nerdyphotographer.com and go to our store, or click the link in the episode notes and get started creating authentic, engaging images today.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
I think that we're ready for our useless information for this episode. Scott, do you remember the Alamo?
I do.
Do you know who the biggest supporter of the Alamo Museum is?
I have no clue.
Phil Collins.
Phil Collins?
Phil Collins has given millions of dollars over the years, and
the British musician?
Yes, Phil Collins.
Phil Collins of Gentle Giant fame?
Of Genesis. And
Genesis?
Yeah. Phil Collins has bought numerous antiquities related to the Alamo over the years and donated them to the Alamo Museum. He does the voiceover at the Alamo Museum for like the tour.
That's crazy.
It is
I did
one
not
of the
know
most
that.
bizarre.
I don't know that that's useless. I think that might be useful. I could be on Jeopardy and someone would ask me that question. It might make me some money.
See, that's what I tell my wife. She says it's all this trivial knowledge that I have. I should be on a game show of some kind, but like these are the things the things we learn. Scott, thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really, truly appreciate it. Where can people find you if they want to find you?
I'm on Threads. I'm no longer on Twitter. And Threads has an incredibly thriving photo community. Not as big as Twitter, but it's much more impactful, much higher engagement. It's threads.net. If you don't have an account there, it's free. And I am born.scott on Threads. And then I have a website, scottborn.com. My email address is scott@scottborn.com. Send me an email. I answer my own email. If I can help you, I will. And that's it. I got nothing to sell. No workshops to fill. No presets to sell. No presets. Nothing. I'm just a guy who wants to help.
Awesome. Thank you again for being on the show.
Happy to be here.
And welcome back. Looks like we're getting this power situation under control, and I haven't grown any extra appendages. So I've got that going for me, which is nice. Many thanks to Scott Bourne for coming on the show. You can find Scott's links in the episode notes. While you are there, you should go and follow along with the Nerdy Photographer, on the various social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Reddit, what have you, at the Nerdy Photo. That's all one word, no underscores, dots, or dashes, at the Nerdy Photo. And, feel free to tell us what you think about this or any of the other episodes that we have out there. Leave your photography related questions or tell us what topics you'd like to hear covered or who you would like to hear me interview on future episodes of the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to tell a friend about the show. We also appreciate your reviews. So go leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Good Pods. On those last two, you can leave reviews for individual episodes. How about that? Hey, F2.0, are we a go to restart this thing?
You've got the touch. You've got the power.
Good to know. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.